you were to pick, 3 rules for life that would lead you down a better path, what would they be?
Well, I think not saying things you know to be untrue. That's a good thing. Don't lie. That's good. Be grateful. And then try to work for the best in yourself and other people. And maybe even broader than that. Try to work for the best, despite your cynicism and resentment. I suppose that's a form of gratitude as well. That's what love means fundamentally, is working for the best of things. And it's a goal. I mean, what's the alternative? Hate? And that's not going to make things better. It's going to make things worse. Oh, generally speaking. So something like truth nested inside of love. Then there's gratitude lurking around the edges. Beauty is important.
More art, right?
Yeah, well, more beauty, period. Everywhere. That would be nice. It's kind of intimidating, beauty.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, because it's an ideal. It judges you. This is something that's quite interesting, is every ideal is a judge. Right? Because
by
you
nature.
Fall short of it. Yeah, but it's an interesting problem that you need an ideal to work towards, but the consequence of that is that you're judged by it.
That's fascinating, because we always want the ideal, right?
Yeah, well, I recommend it to people that they try to reward themselves for improving over who they were yesterday, rather than punishing themselves for their deviation from the ideal. Look for incremental improvements and let yourself know that you've managed them.
Is it important to hold the ideal, but also then keep short-term goals of
yes,
you
definitely.
Against yourself?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, you want to break it down into, and then you do this with kids too. You want to set someone a task that will stretch them beyond their limit, but not be impossible, right? So that's part of being intelligent and careful within a relationship, because it'd be nice to facilitate success. I mean, maybe it has to be punctuated by failure from time to time, but that's one of the things you do as a therapist, is try to set things up so that people succeed in moving towards their goals, and try to make the tasks small enough so that they're a reasonable probability that they will be completed successfully. Well, so we live inside a damaged structure, and we also bear responsibility for that damage, because we don't do everything we can to constantly repair it. And you might say, well, that's actually one of the fundamental, people say, well, what's the meaning of life? What they really mean is, what's the positive meaning of life? Because as we've already discussed, the negative meanings of life are more or less self-evident. Well, the positive meaning of life is to be found in noting the state of lack of repair of the walled city that you inhabit, and then sallying forth to do something about that, to repair the breaches and to fix up the walls and to make the structure that you inhabit as secure and as productive as it possibly can be. And there's no shortage of opportunities to do that. You can do that in your own mind. You can do that in your own room. You can do that in your own household, in your local community. And maybe if you get good at doing it at all those levels, then you can start to look beyond that. And so there's challenges. That's the thing that's kind of interesting about this insufficient structure, is that it has a set of challenges built into it because of its insufficiency, and perhaps even because of its corrupt nature, that calls forth the potential response from you of heroic adventure. And the heroic adventure is to man the barricades and repair the city. And you can always do that. It doesn't matter what your personal circumstances are. There's always something that isn't right near you, isn't correct, isn't laid out properly, that you could just fix if you wanted to. And one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is the idea that if you adopt an attitude that's like that the role that you should play is to make things better wherever you are, however you can, that what would actually happen would be that things would get better wherever you are in all sorts of ways, and that we've really, as a species, you might say, or maybe even as singular individuals, we've explored that rarely. It isn't something that's put forth as a proposition that often, and it's quite surprising to me. And you know, I had an interesting experience the other day. I went to the keg. I go there because I have food allergies, and they're very careful with people who have food allergies. And the waiter took me to the table, and he said that he had been watching my lectures, and that's a very common experience. And he was happy about that, and he said that he'd had 2 promotions at the keg in the last 4 months because he'd been watching my lectures. And like, I really found that an affecting experience, because you know, you might say, well, he's working as a waiter at the keg and there's nothing particularly heroic about that, and I disagree with that, actually, because I don't care where you're located, you can do a hell of a job, and I mean that literally. At whatever job you have, you can take whatever job you have and you can make it a real nice little piece of absolute misery. Or you can act like a civilized human being and notice that no matter where you are, there's a richness and a complexity that's completely inexhaustible right at hand. And then you can take that seriously, and you can say, well, I happen to be a waiter at the keg, and perhaps that's not what I expected, and he's a young guy, and perhaps that isn't where I want to end up, but it's not nothing. It's a rich environment, and I can make it a lot better if I want to. I can get along properly with my coworkers and not gossip behind their back, and I can treat my customers properly, and if an opportunity comes my way, I can take it, and I can see what happens. And so he said that's what he'd started doing, and that things were working out much better for him. He was in a much better job than he was 3 months ago. And 3 months, that's nothing, right? I mean, that's a nice trajectory. It's an uphill trajectory, and that's what you want, really. An uphill trajectory is actually even better than being somewhere good, as far as I'm concerned, because one of the things that really makes your life meaningful is the clear realization that you're headed somewhere better than you are now. And then it's even better if you also understand that there's a direct causal relationship between the things that you're doing and the steepness of that incline. And so I get a lot of letters from people like that, and they're most frequently young men, although not always. And they say, well, you know, I've been listening to these lectures and I decided that I'm going to try to take responsibility for my life, and so I've started to stop doing all the stupid things that I know that are stupid, that I know I shouldn't be doing, and I've started doing some of the things that aren't stupid that I know I should be doing, which seems pretty obvious, really, if you think about it. But obvious though it may be, that isn't necessarily what people do. And then they write and say, you can't believe what difference that makes. And they're thrilled about it. And so I'm thrilled about it when I get letters like that, because I really don't experience anything as better than a letter like that or a message like that, because it's so good to see things that aren't so good replaced by something better. And I really do think it's an open question. I truly believe it's an open question to what degree we could make things better if that's what we actually aimed at doing.